Is this on at all, or? Oh, it is on a little bit. Okay. Hi, I'm Ben Blount. Yeah, Brad and I worked together at an agency several years ago. Had this cool idea for Night Studio. He bought me tacos and told me about what he was planning. And yeah, asked if I'd talk and told me the theme was turning points. And what he was talking about those last few years is kind of coincides with what my turning point would be. I can even narrow it down to a specific date. So January 2nd, I got this email. I was on vacation with my family in California, hanging out, and then my friend Lisa, who she and her husband just bought, I live in Evanston, she and her husband had bought this live workspace in Evanston. The front part used to be a butcher shop. They turned it into a gallery. It's like cool on the corner, these big windows, and they live in the back. So they wanted to activate the space in the front. And we had talked on and off about, oh, I make stuff sometimes, and maybe you should show some things. And she got this opportunity for a show. Do you have time to stop by the space today for a quick discussion on a show? The Block Museum, which is the museum at Northwestern's campus, is willing to promote an event in our space that complements their upcoming show. Think we could host something interesting. I have to have them the copy by the end of this week. So I'm like, I'm on vacation. Like, I don't have anything planned. And so this was kind of the impetus for what would be my turning point. So before this email, and currently, I'm an art director. Work at an agency, Razorfish Health, down in Chicago. All our clients are healthcare companies. People I work with are cool. And I got some former coworkers here. The work's pretty interesting sometimes. But on and off throughout the years, I had this kind of interest in wood type and letterpress. So my turning point is kind of about my side hustle or my passion project. So this is a picture of me, kind of a moody picture of me in my basement studio. I've got a bunch of wood type and metal type and a small sign press. I was at a meeting a few weeks ago talking about connecting artists with business and how to get your name out there. And someone said, you never know where art on the wall will take you. And for me, this phrase really embodies what my journey has kind of been. And there's two elements of this phrase that really resonated with what I've been doing the last few years. Making and sharing. So art is making, creating something, doing something that you like, something for you that's not necessarily client-based, that really kind of gets your blood pumping. And then the art on the walls is the sharing. So it doesn't have to be a gallery wall. It could be Instagram. It could be showing it to your friends, not making stuff and kind of putting it in the basement, which I was doing for years prior. A little backstory about me. Born and raised in Detroit. Anybody been to Detroit lately? Yeah, great city, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I grew up kind of a regular art kid, the kid that drew all the time, and I drew a lot of Snoopy and Peanut stuff, and always interested in art. Went to school in St. Louis, studied graphic design, and then after school, I knew I wanted to be in Chicago, so I moved to Chicago. Did textbook design for a while, freelanced on and off, and then stumbled upon a letterpress class at Columbia College, Chicago. Always in love with type as a designer, and yeah, this class was just magical for me. It kind of brought everything to life, the physical type, kind of seeing how these point sizes and leading and all these terms that we use in design gets transferred into real physical objects. So that kind of lit my fire. I decided to enroll in the grad program at Columbia College, so I have an MFA in interdisciplinary book and paper arts. 3 pillars of that was kind of hand book binding, letterpress printing, and hand paper making. Left the agency and worked at art school for a few years in Cleveland, trying to use my new art degree and try to figure out a way to be kind of more creative with it. That didn't work. Came back to Chicago. Worked at a few more agencies, moved back to Detroit to be a part of the renaissance of everything was going on. That didn't work either, so came back to Evanston. And that email and being back in Evanston was the turning point for me. So of me, and that turning point is making and sharing my work on a consistent basis. Like making the time, I still have a full-time job, I'm married, I got a kid, but like making the time to make the work and to put it out there. So I'm gonna show you a few examples of the work that I do and why I make the work. And a lot of times, it's stuff out in the world. So I don't know if you guys have seen the newspaper lately or been on the internet, but it's kind of fucked up out there. There's a lot of stuff politically. There's a lot of conversations that people are having that I think are wrong or weird, or I want to kind of put my take on it. So a lot of my work is a reaction to stuff that I see or hear out in the world. James Murphy from LCD Sound System said the best way to complain is to make things, and that's what I do. As opposed to whining about it or crying about it, I see something like, oh, I got a book for that, or I got a print for that, and I make something and put it out there and try to like influence or change the conversation. So this book is called Africans in America, and when you open the book, this is on the first page. You do not take a person who for many years has been hobbled by chains and liberate him, bring him up to the starting line in a race, and then say, you are free to compete with all the others, and still justly believe that you have been completely fair. So the book is in response to when people talk about slavery and the influence of slavery, you're like, oh, that was so long ago, why are you still bringing up that old stuff? So I made this book kind of in response to that. So this is how the book opens, and when you flip the page, the first page says 1619, the first enslaved Africans are brought to Jamestown, Virginia. And then when you flip the next page, 1620, 1621. Flip again, 1622, 1623. So you flip through about 100 pages, blank pages with just dates, until you get, to the next marked page, 1865, the 13th Amendment is ratified. So the pages with text have a red stripe on them, and they mark kind of pivotal moments in kind of human equal rights for black folks. Flip through another 100 years, 1964, Civil Rights Act. I've done this book on and off, different variations, and this one was from 2009, and when you flip to it at the back, it says Barack Obama was sworn as the president, racism is officially ended. So there's a little tongue-in-cheek answer there. So the cool thing about this is if you look at it from the side and you look at just the red pages, you can see this much is slavery, this much is legal segregation, Jim Crow, this much is the civil rights movement, and this is when we're supposed to be in this post-racial America. So the idea is it takes the kind of conversation that we're used to having and showing it to people in a different way, kind of recontextualizing things. And a lot of my work is about race and identity, stuff that people don't want to talk about, especially interracially. People get upset about it, people get defensive, people get mad. So I'm trying to diffuse that and have people have these conversations in a way that maybe they're not used to. Black Lives Matter movement. The response to this a lot is all lives matter or blue lives matter. They assume it's a statement against something rather than stating, hey, Black Lives Matter also. There's kind of an unsaid to at the end of this. So for this one, I made a shirt. So using that ampersand shirt that I know many of you might have seen, I think it started out as a Beatles one first. It's a list of things with an ampersand, popular culture. You see these shirts in lots of different ways. So between Black Lives Matter, I added love and strive and hope and struggle. So in this instance, the context is black folks are human and they love and they struggle and they have hard times, and they're just saying they're human and go through things like everyone else does, and therefore they matter. And so I made up a bunch of these shirts and I sell them and people wear them, and it provokes a conversation. People stare at you. They ask how you got it, or especially if you're a white person wearing it, they might ask you about it. I've had people say it makes them feel more comfortable somehow wearing a Black Lives Matter shirt with these other words. It seems less of a difficult statement or a challenge, and so that was the idea for this one. This is my daughter modeling the shirt. The next one. This was from something I heard at the office. I heard there's a coworker of mine, a white woman, said to a black coworker, if I had a day off for every time a black man got murdered, we would never go to work. So I was like, wow, that's really racist. I can't. And she said this on Martin Luther King Day, and I was like, why would you say that at work? It just seemed like a strange thing to say. So my first thought, I was going to collect like all the racist things I've heard at work and make this big compendium, like this is racist stuff you hear every day at work. But I thought, you know, that's kind of funny to me, or kind of, I don't know, what's the point in that? So I decided to take it and flip it and think about, okay, what if every time a black man was killed, you would never go to work and it was a holiday. So I did some research and found all the black men that were murdered in Chicago in 2016, and I put them on a 2007 calendar as holidays. So it ends up being 275 holidays, and there were 535 black men killed in 2016, and their deaths are marked as holidays for the next year's calendar. So you could see each red dot was a man that was killed, and on the right-hand side, listed in chronological order were the names of the people. So, you know, Chicago is supposed to be a violent city. We hear statistics all the time about bad stuff happening on the south side, on the west side of town. And so for this, I'm trying to kind of humanize these people, maybe celebrate, elevate their lives a little bit, so they're not just statistics, but they're real people where bad things happen to them. Sometimes, you know, through their own fault, but bad nonetheless. I had this up in a show, and this young girl asked me, like, what's the calendar? What are the red dots? And so I'm having this conversation with her about it, probably in a way that would be easier, or I would even be able to have if it was a newspaper or just some stats. I also made a page-a-day calendar with this. So, not that you, I mean, if you would sit it on your desk and you could, it's more of an art piece, flip through it, and yeah, every day there is the date and the names of the people who were killed. I think there's a day in August, there were 7 people killed. That was the biggest day. And also you can look through and see, like, in the summertime, there really are more murders, and like how many people got killed on Christmas and New Year's, those kind of things. It was an interesting kind of experiment. There's this guy. For this one, I was thinking about this was right, I think this is the first piece I did for the show right after I got the email, thinking about his inauguration, or he was running, thinking about the inauguration, and his Make America Great Again phrase. So I've changed it so that, so I've got it looking like it's red, white, and blue. It's got the stars, it's got the bars. But if you read the blue as long as the red, it says, "We will fight to make absolutely certain that America lives up to its great promise of equal opportunity again and again until we're all free." So kind of taking that phrase, flipping it into something positive. The blue bars in between the big and Make America Great Again is kind of a way for you to kind of read between the lines and to think about what are they really saying when they're saying this Make America Great Again phrase. Like, when was America great? What made it great? What would happen for it to be great again? So kind of dissecting that phrase, and I'm taking a different spin on it. I got the opportunity to have a billboard up for a show that I did. So this billboard is right on the 606 at Kimball. So if anybody's jogging or biking along, you could see Make America Great. It's funny because I've been there a few times and see people kind of walk by and, like, you know, is someone really putting Make America Great Again? And you have to kind of pause and take a minute to take a second look to get it. So that's up now. It's going to be up through the midterm elections, and on Sunday, September 9th, we're going to be out there by the billboard, kind of getting together and having some drinks and food and hopefully conversations if people want to come and hang out. I was making this talk, and then I realized that none of this stuff is print stuff, because you kind of kick it off with letterpress, and then I'm like showing you shirts and posters, and none of this stuff is print stuff, so I threw some. I actually do print. When Brad was mentioning Hamilton, I was an artist in residence. So Hamilton Wood Type Museum is in Two Rivers, Wisconsin, which is just north of Sheboygan, like right on the lake. And it's the largest collection of wood type in the world. But it's a working museum. So you can go see how the type is made and see the collection. But they invite artists to come in and print, and you can take workshops there. If you're interested in print culture at all, it's an amazing place. They have a collection of like Barnum Bailey circus posters, all hand-cut wood carvings. There'll be like door-sized posters, and there's 7 of them because it's a 7-color print. So it's like really awesome, amazing stuff. People are really cool. Yeah, it's worth a visit. They have regular museum hours. It's definitely worth a visit. So some of this stuff is I did at the residency. This is one thing I did. So all this is wood type. They have this number 1 is like this big. So I found all these cool wood letters, and it's like I got to print something with this. So this piece is talking about kind of how we're identifying people. The 1-drop rule refers to the idea that 1 drop of black blood makes you black. It's a way to kind of separate people. If you have a little bit of black in you, you're black. Otherwise, you're white and it's pure. 3/5 of all persons refers to the 3/5 compromise in the Constitution, where black people were counted as 3/5 of a person for voting and tax purposes. And 1/8 black is similar to 1-drop rule in that 1/8 black makes you black. Again, try to just make sure the races stay separate. This is so when I went there, I had everything planned out on what I was going to print, or most of the things planned out just to maximize my time there. And this was one piece where I wanted to do something just using kind of the plethora of type they had and just come up with something using what I saw. So they had those cool woodcuts of that rooster and that plane and the finger, and they had the guns. So I put the stay ready with the guns, I put the stay woke with the rooster, and just this is just kind of a poster. I don't know if you guys remember Maxine Waters reclaiming her time. There's a YouTube kind of meme of this. She's questioning someone, and the person is kind of stalling for time, so they don't answer the question. They're like giving her compliments and all that stuff. And she's like, reclaiming my time, like kind of reclaiming her power. Quit wasting my time on trying to ask you these questions. So I did a print of that. This is a series I did of portraits. There's 6 or 7 portraits, and the text below is kind of just a first-person account of some kind of incident someone had. It's not necessarily racial, but how they were stereotyped or prejudged. This one is about a black woman who she was straightening her hair and lost all her hair, so her hair was really short. People tell her she didn't look feminine, that she looked like a lesbian, that she looked like a dyke, and just how hurtful that was. She was kind of judged for the way she looked. This is something else I did at Hamilton. Does anyone know the phrase "black don't crack"? Anybody familiar with that? So I knew that phrase growing up. It refers to the melanin in black skin allows people to age well. So you see black women, they look like they're 40 years old, but they're 60 years old because of their skin tone. I was talking to a friend about it, and he told me about Asian don't raisin, which I thought was really funny. I had never heard that one, so looked around and then saw that brown don't frown is a thing, put them all together and did this rainbow print. I just thought it was cool that all these people of color have this same phrase in their culture to kind of say that, hey, it's good to be non-white and to have some color in your skin. And so an Asian don't raisin is hilarious. So yeah, and the cool thing about Hamilton, so all this is wood type. So part of it, so I had this idea, but the other part of it is like finding these fonts. So I wanted 3 fonts in the same size. Had to make sure there was tons of A's so I can do Asian and raisin. So a lot of it was, I took 3 or 4 hours like searching for type to find, because they're not all complete sets. So like finding the right type, is that the right type for the Asian one? And so part of it was hunting and pecking and using their collection to its best use for my purposes. Another one from the museum. I was thinking about colored, Negro, Black, African American, putting in this kind of timeline, just the idea that Black folks in America have had these names so they're given names, there's some like, they're trying to, pro-Black, they're giving themselves names, African American, to try to get a closer claim to Africa. I'm wondering, is there going to be another name in 20, 40 years that we're going to decide to call ourselves? And just that's a unique position to be in, that this whole naming of your race. But in the back, so it's black paper. In the back, black on black, I got the N-word, and that there's a specter of that kind of in the background. That's how we're seen by a lot of people and in this culture. So it's you can't really tell here, but it's metallic silver on black and then black on black. And it's cool because depending where the light is, you can't necessarily see the kind of big word lurking in the background. I also make books too. This one, so I made the paper for this. letterpress printed and bound it by hand. This was a ABC book, which is called an abecedarium. The title is ABC, Abecedarium of Black Culture. So it was A through Z, all kind of black culture from different ways. G was for goat, and then this page flips out and it says Go Ali, and it's about Muhammad Ali. So some of it was like historical. E was for enslaved, F was for free. T is for Tulsa, talking about the Tulsa race riot. So it's like poster type stuff, informational type stuff, funny stuff, just black culture from lots of different ways. So there's the press I use at the residency at Hamilton. It was really cool. They gave me my own area. I'm printing stuff there, got a drying rack, access to a bunch of type. And for me, the turning point was that email about that show. So I got my act together, wrote her, came up with a title, came up with a description, sent it to her, worked my butt off and put this show up. And since then I've been like actively working and showing my work, having more shows, doing talks like this. I just came back from Florida, giving a talk at Florida Atlantic University and doing a workshop there. I'm going back to Hamilton this November as a speaker at the big Ways Goose conference. And so it's just been like amazing that all this has changed in this last 2-year period, all from me kind of doing what I've wanted to do and kind of been dancing around the edges of it, but really committing to it and taking the time and making my work and sharing it as well. Like some of these books that in my show were like 10 years old. And so my friends who knew me are like, oh, this is amazing. When did you do this? I'm like, it's really, really old. I just have never shown it to anybody. So yeah, taking my work, putting it out there and letting people see it and respond to it has been, yeah, life-changing for me. I made this print several years ago. I'm definitely a designer and a thinker and a planner, and I was trying to figure out about a big decision and going back and forth and asking my friend about it and kept asking him and asking him, and he's like, I think you've thought long enough. And I think a lot of creative people have that, like, we're like, are we gonna do this and figure out how to do it and the timing isn't right, or I don't wanna put that up because it looks a little goofy. It's like, you just gotta do it. Think less more about it, do more. Doing it is practice, you'll get better at it. I mean, it really has been great for me. For me, printing has been magic. Yeah, it's been a good balance to my day job. The client frustrations are a lot less because I know that I'm doing this kind of work for me when I get home. Met a lot of cool people, get to have interesting conversations when you kind of put out this sort of provocative, sometimes work. Yeah, it's just been really, really awesome. And so that invitation to really get out there and show my work has been a turning point for me. There you go. Thank you. I think we're doing a Q&A if anybody has a question.
I have a question.
Yes.
I have a microphone.
Yeah, 1 second.
I don't think you'll hear me.
I'm gonna hang on to it.
All right. So when you began, I thought I had a good question. And I was like, well, and the contemporary art director has the wealth of fonts and typefaces and their creativity's boundless, right? That must be so frustrating. But then I saw some of the work you were showing of how you're limited to the typefaces you can find and how that's actually kind of spurred additional creativity on the next level of things. So I was hoping you could talk about that process and how frustrating yet liberating that is. Is there a balance there?
Definitely. And first, I got this from a mentor of mine, Amos Kennedy, who is a great printer. You should look him up. Every time he does a Q&A, the first person who asks a question gets a print.
Nice.
Encourage participation. So yeah, it really is. Like, so in my basement I have, I don't know, 10 fonts of wood type, and so everything I make in my studio is from that type. So I only have certain typefaces, I only have certain sizes, and so it's, you know, kind of working within those restrictions and how you become creative and make things interesting with what you have. It's cool. It's like, it makes you kind of, having less options makes things go faster too. I don't have all the fonts in the world. I have a couple medium-sized ones. I have one big one, and I have a bunch of small ones. And so everything I do is some combination of those. Yeah, I probably only use 6 of the 10 I have. And I have a whole bunch of metal type that I never use just because it's, I don't know, too small and annoying. So yeah, it's really cool. It's like you go down there, especially before I had a press, because the press I have is about this big, but usually people print on VandenBerg presses, which are about 6.5 feet long. It's a big piece of equipment. They're really rare, and so everyone doesn't have one. So before I got my own press, if I wanted to print, I had to go borrow someone else's or rent some, and like time is a thing. So you want to get in there and like get going and printing. You can't just sit there and like think and think. Like time's ticking. You only have access to this equipment for a certain amount of time. You have to get in there. So it just makes me move faster, and it's a good counterpoint to the work I do during the day. It's like I have to get in there, I have to work faster, I get to do it with my hands, and so it's a really nice, yeah, it's liberating to work within those restrictions, for sure. Yeah. This dude in the front.
I just want the mic. The body of work that you shared in the portrait series about the people telling their stories and stuff, I think as a concept, it would be great. It's a tremendous idea, you know, to get these really intimate, honest stories and then, you know, doing with it what you did. How in the heck did you like find or instigate or start those conversations? Like how did you get those subjects to share those kinds of stories?
I started with friends and family, like just ask, because I figured someone has some story of being kind of prejudged and judged by their looks, and so yeah, I started, like my brother's one of the people, my wife is one of the people, and so as I've been doing more of these, I've been stretching out. I've been doing these pieces that, yeah, get people's real stories and kind of humanize. I do another piece, it's a book called First Impressions, where I ask people the first time they felt like they were the other. I feel like that's probably a universal feeling. Yeah, I ask people I know, and then if I meet someone, I'm like, hey, I'm doing this art project. Could I talk to you? And everybody always says yes. And when I did that project, my first thought was, oh, I'm going to do this project, and everyone's going to say, oh, when I was 6 years old, someone called me out of my name on the playground, and I kind of ran home crying. I thought that was going to be like the thread that bound everybody, and everyone's going to have that same experience. But as I talked to people, like from different ages, from different parts of the country, the answers were like so wildly different that was the surprising part. I talked to a friend of mine who is a few years older than, she might be about, she's like mid-40s, but she grew up in Mississippi. And her story was having colored and white waiting rooms at the doctor's office. And I was like, wow, that's crazy. And then she said, and then in 1980, when they took them down, I was like, 1980? She's like, yeah, they took them down in 1980. And the part where she felt other was after they took them down, everybody still went to their own separate waiting rooms. And that kind of crushed her. Like, they don't have to have the sign, everybody knows you belong here and you belong there. So like something I would have never experienced growing up in Detroit. And yeah, just like people have these stories, but everyone has a time where they felt like, oh, you don't belong, you're not one of us. And so collecting those, it's really enlightening. Yeah. Right.
So uncomfortable. So not everybody has access to a really cool printing press or printing the Hamilton Museum. But I think that the really stark and colorful and graphic nature of your kind of work could appeal to younger people. So how would you recommend that a young person who maybe doesn't have access to things, who maybe has a limited budget, could start to express themselves in the same way and feel that they can contribute to Black Lives Matter or any kind of movement that they really think is important to them?
Yeah, I feel like you could use the tools that are available to you. Like I've done Chicago Zine Fest before, and I'd never done zines before, but I had some ideas that I wanted to kind of figure out and put out there and didn't have time to get them printed. And so I kind of did them on the computer and just photocopied them at Kinko's and stapled them. And they're into like selling things at a low cost, like too cheap, I think, but like $2 books and $5 books. So I had a bunch of these saddle stitched books. I did them on the computer, but people could draw them, and a lot of people were hand-drawn, and like get them out there. You could, yeah, put out a message. You could tell stories. People had comic books. I think getting them in front of people, that's a big thing. There's a lot of people who I see, oh, I draw, and oh, I've got a sketchbook, and who sees it? Like you and your best friend. Like no one ever sees it. Like with Instagram, you can put it out there. You could pass it out on the street. Just make a bunch of copies and pass it out. I wouldn't worry about selling right away. Like, I mean, I guess it's easy to say because I have a job, but like if the idea is to get it out there, like get it out there and you never know what happens. So I think people probably already know how they could do something. Maybe they write poetry, but they never share it with anybody. Nowadays, you can make your own chapbook. You can have the print on demand. Like, I think most people know ways that they can get something out there, but they just don't get it out there. Yeah.
Hi. Design and social issues is a complicated space.
Yeah.
If done well, it can be incredibly powerful. And if not done well, it's one of those things that can be detrimental in a way.
Yeah.
How do you know? I mean, I've seen a bunch of the things you shown was great. And so it's like, how do you know that it's ready to share,
Yeah, I feel like I try to, maybe this is as a designer, I feel like I try to like gauge, oh, if I do this, people are gonna like this, or they're gonna not like it because of this reason. So I try to like gauge or manage the audience response, and I can never get it right. But like in my head, I'm trying to think ahead of how people will react, and I show it to people. Like my wife sees everything before I show it. Is this too much? Does this just seem like, is this just me mad about something? Does this seem mean or angry or, yeah, so I share it with a small circle, and I really am trying to, I really want to have a conversation. I want people to take this in, and they don't have to talk to me about it. Maybe they'll talk to someone else about it. Maybe they'll think about it differently. So I probably come a little less hard on some things than I could, in hopes to get more kind of engagement with it. Yeah, but I am careful. I've thought about even the Make America Great Again. Like I thought of that, I was like, oh, this is really great. It's really kind of powerful. And we put it up in this show, and so it's on the back wall. And Evanston's a pretty liberal town. People are walking by, and from the window, all they can see is Make America Great Again. And they're pissed. They're like, this is Evanston. What do you do? Have this stuff off and like knocking on the windows. We're like, no. Come in and read. You gotta read the whole thing. It's little type. And so you're right. People can really react harshly. I've had talkbacks after shows, and people were like, let me show. I have this one card that I did. Yeah, so for the show I did in February, I made these cards, and it says, I can't be racist. I went to the Recollection Art Show. And I thought that was funny, like, hey, I can't be racist. I went to this black guy's art show, right? This is like a free pass. So I thought it was like pretty humorous and pushing it. And someone was like, I was pretty offended by this card. Like, hey, what are you saying, that I'm racist? And I'm like, I thought some people would be offended, but no, I don't think you're racist. I'm trying to play off of a trope. And so I try to be careful, but when you talk about something like race or social issues, people are going to disagree and be angry. And, if we talk about it, that's cool. Thanks.
All right, any more questions? More cues? All right. Thank you, Ben. You got some stuff here?
Yeah. I got some postcards that you guys can have. I printed. One says resist. One says tell the truth, and one says hold on. There's a couple different colors, and you guys can help yourselves to a postcard if you like.
Awesome. Thank you.